Hi, my name is Meshak Masibo, and welcome to Meet the Founder. So, Meet the Founder is a premier talk show that allows us to learn from the experiences of founders in the startup ecosystem in Kenya and beyond. So, today I'm particularly privileged to welcome William to be the first speaker on this show. So, William is a founder for Kurasa, for a company called Kurasa Africa, among many others that is founded over a substantial period of time, and you're hoping to gain and learn some insights from his journey and experience. So, how I know William as a client, as a very successful entrepreneur who's managed to garner lots of funding beyond what we can publicly disclose. But I'd want him to speak and introduce himself. So who is William Nguru, and what has your journey been like? Maybe just an introduction, then we can go to the journey.
Yes, so William Nguru is my name. Uh, William is, I think, a name I was named after a preacher in the United States back in the 60s. And then Nguru is after my grandfather. So why I'm saying that is because, the name is also a lot of what you carry. And in my Kikuyu language, Nguru means someone who moves slow. So I think there were tendencies where my grandfather used to move very slow. And that seemed to describe how I grew up and how I took things. So it's like slow but sure, but also very, very ambitious, I would say. William is also, I like to call myself a brother nowadays, a brother. Like brotherhood is more of being someone who cares to make an impact. Fundamentally, I'm driven by social justice. So changing the situations that I come across. And mostly this is situations where opportunities aren't available to more common bottom of the pyramid people. And yeah, that is what drives me on a daily basis. I, yeah, and I'm a tech guy. I have a background in telecommunications. I've worked in fintech, in health, logistics, retail, commerce, and now I'm in education. EdTech is the industry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah. So I think we'd want to just drill down to some of what you've said and just go back to your journey. So what was the first startup you started, your first tech startup, your first idea, and how did it go? And as you tell us a bit more about that also, have you ever failed in any startup? Have you ever started something and you didn't attract funding, or it didn't reach the market? So, and how yeah, maybe you can share on that, yeah.
Yeah. I think my first startup goes back to when I was in uh, class 8, actually class 7. I like to talk about it a lot because back then we had computer games, and those were the days we played FIFA 202, played FIFA 98. And it was a startup, but it was not legally constituted. So we used to do, back at home, we had uh, a DVD writer computer, which my dad had bought. And at that time, I remember at around 2 or 3, 2 or 4, CDs used to cost as low as 10 shillings, 20 shillings. And because there was a demand for those games, I had I had acquired a library of games. FIFA, there were 2 discs, Need for Speed, Motorbike, and all those other games at the time. And what I used to do, I used to duplicate the CDs, buy a CD at 20 bob, sell it at 100. FIFA was 200. And depending on, there were different games that we used to resell at different prices. I think that's when I first earned money for adding value or for selling something that people needed. Now, all the way in high school, we had, different businesses that we did. But in tech, my first startup, which I helped co-found, was in 2010. And at the time, it was actually accidental. Uh, so I was in Strathmore University, and we have computer labs which people come and share. Now, on one day, I got into a lab and I found someone's flash disk had been left in the lab. And so what I did, I checked the flash disk and I saw CVs. So it's normal for you to find CVs in students' flash disk. So I checked a CV and I found the number. So I called the number. I told them, "Hey, you left your flash disk and this is my number. You can pick it from me." So yeah, he came and he picked and he was very impressed. Then he asked me, "So what course do you do?" I said, "I do DBIT." And so you can do a website for me. At the time, I didn't know how to do a website, but I said yes. I said, "Yeah, I can do a website for you. How much will it cost?" I think we said 15,000. Uh, yeah, that was back in 2010. So I went back and did a lot of research on how do you do a website? What does it take? How do you put it online? And, and I was particularly fascinated by custom domain names. Like you can say meshach.co.k or Meshach Masibo. And that was the research. And I found it very, very genius that, you can have your name on the internet as a resource. And that's when we started our first company. We called it Domains Africa. So it was primarily to build websites, to sell domain names, to build websites, and also to host websites for people. That was in 2010. It was registered, and we went into 2012, 2011, 2012, and we did a couple of jobs. Of course, it was not long before I realized that the entry point was very low for someone getting into that kind of a business. Because if I was a first year student and I could set up such a business, of course, it goes without saying that any other first year student anywhere else can set up such a business and they will be competing with you. And to them, they can charge as low as possible because they don't have that business, business cost. And so I had the interest of building much more sustainable business. And I think that was in 2013, we tried out a product. Actually, 2012, we tried out a product called Pata SQ. So Pata SQ was a startup where we got houses for students around Strat. So Strat is a university that doesn't have housing for, or rather accommodation for students who land there. So the whole housing is by private investors and homes. So we used to live in SQs back then. And so part of SQ, what we used to do is we used to list available accommodation around Strathmore, list it on our website, and then the students would come and find and, follow up with those leads. So again, we did that for about a year, built a bit of a team. But for me, the challenge was the inability to control. And also, we were going to make money just the same as agents. But agents have a lot more information and they're more localized, so they can give you more updated information. So that was part of SQ. We won a couple of awards, made a bit of money, but never broke even. That was still in campus. And after I graduated, we went into work. But still, the desire to do startups was really, really there. So we are now at 2014. That's when I graduated. So I worked at a company called Mobile Decisioning. And all this time, I had still been working at a research lab called HP in Strathmore that does work for Clinton Foundation. And basically working in the health sector, we built a solution for the supply chain at KEMSA. Then I went into work, worked for a year, then I resigned at Mobile Decisioning. We were doing fintech. And so when I left, that's when now I came back to the startup world. And our initial product was a loyalty management tool, which we called Paid at the time. That still, is successful to date. And I think serves about 300,000 customers in Kenya. And the idea was just to build a loyalty solution that is affordable for businesses. So, for a business like, let's say, Carrefour, for them to build a loyalty tool, they have the money. It takes a lot of infrastructure to do that, putting it in place, cards. So what we built is a SMS-based cards, a loyalty system where when you go and purchase something, you just get an SMS that tells you that you've earned points and how many you've earned, and you can come back and redeem. So it's on a cloud system. So it's very easy to deploy. 5 minutes you have an account. You don't need a department and a department. You don't need to print cards. So it's very affordable. And you don't even manage the losing of cards as we have in these card-based loyalty programs. And we can now offer it affordably at the local stores. So yeah, that's what we built. It was in 2015 after I left. 16, that's when we started. Served a couple of clients, 17, and it's been growing all these years to date. Yeah, so that's my journey. In between that, we tried a couple of other ideas. We tried building an airtime reselling solution. We didn't get much progress. We tried building a delivery solution called ASAP, just like Sandy works like Sandy, where you do an online on-demand solution. Again, we couldn't break even. We couldn't also raise. I think that's also what you asked. And we also did another company called Motilix. So Motilix was a hardware solution for car owners that helps them in maintaining their car. So it's like a hardware that you plug in OBD in your car, and it transmits that information to your phone, so you can tell how your car is performing. Is it consuming too much? When is it due for service? So we buy 8-year-old cars which are off a maintenance plan, and so we were trying to build a maintenance plan for used cars in Kenya. Yeah, we got a bit of recognition, but we couldn't get it somewhere.
Yeah, just on that, I think from what you mentioned, it's been a very long journey for you. Like entrepreneurship has been a
Yeah,
true long journey, and you mentioned the aspect of that you failed at some points.
correct.
So how did you bounce back? Maybe someone is listening and it's their first startup, they weren't able to raise funding, or the market didn't want it, so they're forced to shelve it. So how did you navigate in those many things that you started when you failed? What did you have in mind when you got back, or what made you bounce back?
Let me say that my failures haven't been extremely catastrophic to the extent of being wiped out. But yeah, I think for me, it's just moving on to the next thing in terms of having other things that I still think I want to do. It's like even now, even if I stop doing everything that I'm doing right now, I have a ton of ideas that I want to do, because we have lots and lots of problems that affect us. So I think for me, getting back to something else is a question of what is the next problem that you can identify easily, that is pressing enough and that you can relate to, or that someone very close to you can relate to. You could come across your siblings, your family, or your friend who tells you that they're struggling with a certain thing, and maybe you've had that same problem elsewhere. So for me, that's the ideation plan. How do you keep identifying problems to which you want to solve? Yeah, I think that's it. And
Okay.
also, for me, the decision was to get into entrepreneurship as early as possible before these things come,
Yeah.
these responsibilities, because definitely it means you have less risk appetite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
think
I think I've been lucky to not be in a situation of being completely wiped out.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing from what you're saying is resilience, a lot of resilience, that if you fail in one idea, you can still think about more ideas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
So what
absolutely.
what to you, what feeds that resilience? Is it the belief in yourself? Is it the belief that your next idea will be better? What, because not everyone has access to, or not everyone is that resilient. So what feeds into that resilience for you? What drives you that at the point that I know even if this fails, I've invested in it and it's failed, but I can still try another one? What feeds that for you?
Yeah. So for me, like I said, I'm social justice driven. So
Yeah.
I want to see more people access what is inaccessible to them. So, like I said, on the loyalty solution, my desire was to see that loyalty programs being accessed by more people who don't even shop in towns, who shop in, you know, in smaller towns in Kenya. My desire was to see smaller businesses access the same services that bigger businesses are able to access. So for me, it's always, how can you bring something closer to people who haven't been able to access it? And you will see that even in education, what we're trying to do at Kurasa is we're trying to build quality education to much smaller schools that don't access it. Because we know in Kenya, if you have lots of money, you can get quality education because you can pay for it. But for me, it's always, how do you leverage technology to bring uh, you know better quality to the lower part of the pyramid? Yeah. So that's what drives me.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. You mentioned something about Kurasa. So Kurasa is your company, it's company you
Yes.
formed. So
Yes.
what you've mentioned slightly, just a bit about what it does, but what drove the vision? Where did the vision come from to where it is right now? What was the source?
Yeah. That's actually, I didn't get to 2020
Yeah.
with my story on businesses, because 2020 was a turning point for me.
Yeah.
Corona, actually,
Yeah.
COVID, because as at March 2020, that's when I think now we started seeing shutdowns of of churches, of schools, of all these systems. And I also had now a lot of time at home. And for me, a lot of time is always a time to innovate or to ideate or to come up with other things. So also at the time, we we waived a lot of charges for our clients for the months they were not operating. So also that meant that we also went down on income. Yeah, so we didn't have clients we were serving, we didn't have income, and we had a lot of time. So I met a friend of mine who has worked uh, in the schooling, in the education sector for a long time, providing solutions, tech solutions for schools. And at the time, he also was facing the same challenge. But now he was trying to come up with a solution for remote learning. And I remember when we discussed, mine was just to bring in the clarity. And I was just telling him, why do you need to go and code this when the problem is now? The solution needs to be now. And there are certain solutions that are out there. So we came up with a school. We called it Ziada School at the time. And Ziada School, the name was inspired by tuition. It's like extra learning. So we wanted to offer Ziada, like extra learning to students who are out of school. Of course, at the time, it was the only uh, learning that most of students who came to learn with us were taking. But the point was that even after schools resume, we will still be able to offer Ziada as additional learning for students who go to school. So we went out there, hired students. We borrowed money to pay teachers. We had teachers, we got students, and we managed to convince them that we are offering a certain quality. And we got them to pay, actually. But we still didn't break even, and we were burning money faster than we were making money. So that was a very pivotal moment for me, because you see, for a couple of months, I was doing nothing but running a school online. And that led me to discovering the challenges in the education space. And one of the challenges that affect uh, the quality of education, the direct challenge is actually the amount of work that a teacher has to do. So today, a teacher has to spend, and this is a calculation we do based on data that we collect from them. Like we do surveys, they tell us that it takes about 20 minutes to do a lesson plan. So a teacher has to do 5 to 7 lesson plans a day, which means they have to spend an hour every day. The practicality of that means that they won't do it because there's no time for that. They have teaching to do, and they have also their lives to do. So we endeavored to now build a solution that helps them perform all those tasks and primarily create a feedback loop where they can do assessments that inform how they teach also. And that is when now we pivoted from Ziada School to Kurasa. It was about just at the end of 2020 and beginning 2021. So Kurasa was born. We were 3 founders at the time. Uh, a few months down the line, one founder left, and we were left the 2 of us. Then we slowly hired, and we've now been growing. And
Yeah.
today we have quite
Yeah.
a number of
Yeah. That's amazing. I think we first interacted when you think at the stage of funding. So I think that's also a concern to most of the people. Most of the people who will be listening is the idea of funding. How are you able to attract funding to your idea as an entrepreneur? So how are you able to get someone to fund your project, your startup idea? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, so I think funding, in my previous experience with startups, I've mostly bootstrapped. I think that was very, very important for me to help me appreciate the role of business sustainability, because funding should help you to grow. So first of all, funding is not a jackpot, a bonanza, or prize money that you're not getting money as a reward for pitching. It is it's partnership. That's how I look at it. So I'm making progress, I'm growing something, but I need a partner who can, buy into this vision, and together we can make progress. So now, for anyone who'd be looking at funding now in that way, first of all, like you're looking at it as an enabler or as something that will catalyze your efforts. I think that's the person I would like to speak to first, because there are all these ideologies where people look at funding as a reward for pitching brilliantly. I think that hasn't been for me. So now, assuming that you are now in the right mindset of looking at funding, the first thing is, first of all, to check who are the funders, who funds what. So there's like tons of investors. There is what they believe, there is what their investment thesis is, there is who they fund, the sectors they fund, what impact they're trying to bring. And so the first thing is to align with who do you think you'd want to target, who besides the money you'd want to work with. So even if they give you money, but are they the people you'd want to work with? So once you have narrowed down on a set of potential investors or funders, then now is to look at how do you now align what they want and what you want, because it's not always going to be like in the parallel. You will find a bit of misalignments. Usually investors give less precise funding direction. They're not usually to the specific problem, but more often they will be a bit wide scope. So you need to check what within that scope also aligns with what you're doing. So like now for us, we checked an investor who actually had an education fund. Now the education fund was going to run for I think 10 years, and they had actually even published research showing some of the areas where they see opportunity. And for us, it was we saw ourselves directly in the opportunities that they had presented.
Yeah.
And so you see that makes the pitch easier, because it's like you're just keeping up with a conversation. You're just following up with a conversation based on what they released as findings from the education sector and where the opportunities are. This is where we lie, and we have identified this opportunity on this spectrum.
Yeah.
Now from there, it's now us demonstrating the magnitude of the problem. Have we been able to convince a customer that actually it's a problem and they should pay for it? Then how do we now also demonstrate the size of the market? How many such customers do you have? And what is our plan to get to them? And how are we making progress? So I think for me, someone now looking to raise, once you narrow down to the right kind of investors and you have defined your problem in as close as possible to what your investors care about, then I think you shouldn't find it very hard to raise,
Yeah.
as because now you're informed by actual data.